Haunted villages, cursed lagoons, abandoned islands, and terrifying true horror stories from Turkey await you. Witness the chilling mysteries of Kayaköy, the drowned bells of Gemiler Island, the lost hiker of the Lycian Way, and the whispering lagoon of Oludeniz. Real supernatural encounters, ancient curses, terrifying djinn, and deadly spirits lurk in every shadow. Dare to enter the darkest corners of Turkey where haunted legends, ghostly whispers, and unimaginable horrors await every traveler brave enough to listen. They thought they were just wandering through a quiet, abandoned village in Turkey, seeking forgotten ruins. But Kayaköy is no ordinary ghost town. Haunted by the memories of its past, it waits silently, its empty houses whispering secrets only the brave or the foolish dare hear. Shadows stretch unnaturally across the broken streets. Every step echoes with unseen footsteps. Every corner hides ghostly whispers of children who never left. The air itself feels alive, breathing around the intruders, pulling them deeper into its cursed heart. Paranormal events, unexplained horrors, and the creeping dread of abandoned ruins grip anyone who dares step inside. Tonight, Kayaköy claims new witnesses, and once its haunted paths have touched you, you cannot leave. No one escapes the ghostly whispers of this forgotten Turkish village.
We are watching and waiting.
Daniel, Emily, and Mike had no idea the detour would lead them here. What began as a carefree drive through the Lycian fields ended on a gravel path that seemed to vanish into darkness. They parked the car, the engine echoing against empty houses like a warning. Emily's eyes widened as she stepped forward, camera in hand, fascinated by the eerie beauty. Daniel hesitated, taking slow, measured steps, listening to the wind that whispered through shattered windows. Mike laughed nervously, making jokes about ghost stories and haunted villages, but even he felt the chill crawl up his spine. The village was alive in silence. Its walls watched, its streets waited, and the air itself seemed thick with anticipation. Every footstep sent echoes bouncing, but not just theirs. The faint sound of other steps followed, unseen, deliberate, and patient. They had entered Kayaköy, and the village had already marked them as trespassers.
You should not have come.
Emily was drawn to a house at the end of the street, flashlight slicing through the shadows. She gasped as she saw tiny handprints, countless layers pressed into the stone as if generations of children had clawed to escape. Daniel stepped closer, feeling the cold dampness radiate from the wall. Mike tried to joke, but even his bravado faltered when he traced one of the prints and felt a strange warmth, like a pulse, beneath the stone. The shadows of the ruined village seemed to gather around them, stretching and leaning in ways impossible under the moonlight. Emily's camera captured movement, shapes in the windows that vanished when they blinked. The village was not abandoned. It was waiting, and it had already begun to watch.
Play with us.
Pushing open the heavy door, Daniel led the group into what remained of the chapel. The air smelled of ash and decay, thick with the weight of old prayers that had never been answered. Half-burnt candles flickered inexplicably on the altar. Emily raised her camera, trying to capture it all, but the images distorted into faces screaming silently. Mike whispered that it was just a trick of the light, but even he could not hide the tremor in his voice. Shadows clung to corners like living things, and the wind carried whispers of voices long dead, chanting in tongues older than the village itself. Each step they took seemed to draw them deeper into the heart of the chapel, the shadows growing bolder, reaching out with invisible hands, pulling them toward the altar. The room was no longer a place of worship. It was a cage, and they had stepped inside willingly.
Kneel with us.
Emily turned to call Mike, but he was no longer beside her. Her heart raced as panic surged through her. Daniel ran forward, flashlight trembling, but the narrow alleyways seemed endless, twisting in ways that disoriented the mind. Somewhere behind them, faint laughter echoed, a mocking sound that grew as they ran. Shadows writhed unnaturally across the walls, merging, stretching, and occasionally forming shapes reminiscent of children playing, but with hollow, empty faces. Kayaköy did not just trap them physically, it toyed with their perception, warping reality, erasing paths, feeding on terror. Emily's scream was swallowed by the wind. Daniel called Mike's name again, and only a whisper answered.
You cannot leave.
As the group wandered deeper into the silent ruins, they stumbled upon a hidden courtyard, its entrance choked with ivy and broken stones. The air inside was unnaturally still, as though time itself had forgotten this place. In the center stood a cracked stone well, surrounded by toppled archways. Strange carvings etched into the walls seemed to twist and shimmer in the moonlight. The courtyard seemed alive, watching, waiting. One of them leaned closer to the well and felt a rush of icy air carrying whispers that spoke their names. The carvings began to glow brighter, casting long, unnatural shadows across the walls. They realized too late this was no courtyard of rest. It was a trap, a gate where the cursed villagers had once vanished, and where their souls still lingered.
Leave. Never yours.
Just as the tension in Kayaköy seemed unbearable, a figure emerged from the shadows. Daniel squinted, trying to make sense of the hunched shape. Emily froze, camera trembling in her hands. Mike, ever the brave fool, stepped forward and called a greeting, but the figure didn't answer. Slowly, he realized the man had only one eye, the other socket dark and empty, and his face was contorted in ways no human face should be. The shepherd carried a crooked staff, leaning on it as if it were part of his body. Daniel whispered that the man's presence felt older than the village itself, as if he had always been there, waiting for someone to stumble into this cursed place. The shepherd's voice finally came, hoarse and uneven, recounting a tale that chilled their bones. Long ago, while tending his goats, he had witnessed a djinn wedding, an unholy gathering of djinn deep in the ruins. Since that day, he had been touched, marked, and somehow trapped between the worlds, his eye and face reminders of the village's dark power. Kayaköy wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it had allies waiting in the shadows.
You cannot escape us.
The shepherd raised a gnarled finger toward the empty streets. "Leave before it sees you," he rasped, his voice like gravel. Emily tried to ask questions, but he only shook his head violently, his remaining eye wide with fear or madness. Daniel, trying to rationalize, asked why the village had such power. The shepherd's laugh was a dry rasp that echoed through the ruins, sending a shiver down their spines. It does not forgive curiosity. It does not forgive trespass. I've walked these streets for decades, cursed, scarred, and I've seen what happens to those who linger too long. Mike, laughing nervously, made a step toward the shepherd, only to feel the air thicken around him, as if invisible hands were pressing against his chest. Kayaköy's whispers grew louder, echoing through every corner. The village wanted them to understand the danger, but it would not wait politely. They had already entered its trap.
You are already one of us.
Daniel grabbed Emily's hand, dragging her behind him, while Mike stumbled in panic, tripping over loose stones. The alley seemed alive, walls bending, shadows curling around them. Every step they took, whispers chased them, indistinct but insistent, calling their names. Emily glimpsed shapes flitting in the corners of her vision. Children, goats, ghostly figures, impossible to identify. The shepherd's warning replayed in Daniel's mind, but the village had no patience for rational thought. Every turn seemed to lead them deeper into the ruins, corridors stretching into impossibility, mocking their attempts to escape. Fear thickened in the air, pressing against their lungs, tightening like ropes around their chests.
You cannot leave. You belong.
They stumbled into a courtyard, the moonlight glancing off fragments of stone statues, faces frozen in expressions of terror. Emily pointed her camera at one of them, noticing for the first time that the statue's eyes seemed to follow them. Mike's jokes faltered as the shadows moved independently, creeping along the walls toward them. Daniel's rational mind faltered as he realized they were surrounded, every exit swallowed by darkness. Somewhere in the shadows, faint footsteps of unseen creatures moved in rhythm with their own. The shepherd's tale replayed in whispers. This was where the djinn wedding had danced long ago, leaving a curse that still lingered. And now, the three intruders were dancing in the remnants of that ancient supernatural nightmare.
Come, dance with us.
The friends had no sense of direction. Every turn they took seemed to lead them deeper into Kayaköy's heart, as if the village itself had shifted overnight. Emily's flashlight flickered, throwing long, monstrous shadows on the walls. Mike whispered that it was just the wind, but the shadows moved against the light, forming shapes that lunged at them in silence. Daniel tried to rationalize, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming, and the oppressive darkness seemed to lean closer, pressing cold fingers into their minds. The shepherd's warning replayed in their minds, but they had already crossed invisible boundaries. A distant bell tolled once, echoing through the ruins, though there was no church in sight. And in that instant, the air thickened, pulling them into the shadows themselves, as if the village demanded tribute for their trespass.
You will never leave.
They stumbled back into the courtyard, but it had changed. The broken statues' faces were now animated, twisting in silent screams. Shadows on the ground moved independently, forming shapes of people and animals, swirling around the friends in a slow, macabre dance. Emily tried to photograph them, but the camera screen reflected not the shadows, but twisted versions of themselves, faces gaunt, eyes hollow, expressions of terror frozen for eternity. Daniel realized the village did not just haunt, it absorbed. Kayaköy remembered those who entered, storing them in its spectral memory, feeding on their fear. Mike's laughter was gone, only raw panic remained. And somewhere in the wind, the shepherd's raspy voice echoed, warning them to flee, but the village had already chosen who would remain.
Join us forever.
The three friends found themselves at the chapel once more, drawn inexplicably toward the altar. Shadows pooled, thickening, forming a wall of black that pressed against them, cold and alive. Emily screamed as figures emerged from the darkness. Children, goats, distorted humanoid shapes, remnants of the djinn wedding the shepherd had warned them about. Daniel tried to shield them, but the shadows reached, wrapping around their ankles, tugging, whispering, dragging them toward the altar. Panic erupted. Mike fought blindly, but the village itself seemed to bend reality, collapsing streets and walls into an endless labyrinth. One by one, the shadows claimed their attention, their fear, their very presence. Kayaköy did not kill. They absorbed, feeding on terror, storing it within the ruins, ensuring the memory of trespassers would linger forever. The last thing Daniel saw was the shepherd's empty-eyed stare, silent yet warning. The village had marked them, and there would be no escape.
You belong to us.
When morning finally arrived, Kayaköy appeared empty once again. The wind whispered over shattered rooftops, and the shadows retreated into cracks and corners. No one knew what had become of Daniel, Emily, and Mike. Only the village remembered, its memory alive in the walls, the broken stones, the rusted metal. Tourists would later walk past the ruins, unaware of the horror that had taken place under the moonlit sky. And if anyone dared to step too close, Kayaköy would awaken once more, claiming new witnesses, storing their fear, adding it to its collection of whispers, shadows, and memories of the lost.
Soon they will return.
The shepherd remained, leaning on his crooked staff, watching over the ruins with a hollow stare. He had warned them, but Kayaköy does not listen to warnings. And somewhere beyond the horizon, another group would wander too close, lured by curiosity and the deceptive calm of a forgotten village. The shadows stirred, the whispers gathered strength, and as the wind carried the sound of distant footsteps, the next story was already beginning, another trespasser's journey into the cursed heart of Kayaköy.
Soon it will be your turn.
Gemiler Island, an abandoned, cursed island in the turquoise waters of the Mediterranean, where drowned bells ring beneath the waves and ghostly whispers rise from the deep. Legends speak of lost sailors, haunted ruins, and a sea that claims anyone who lingers too long. Tonight, under a thick veil of fog, the cursed bells echo across the island, their sound chilling and relentless. Shadows move unnaturally along the shore, and the water itself seems alive, whispering secrets no human should hear. Every creak of the broken pier, every ripple in the dark sea promises one thing: those who come here will never return. Gemiler Island waits, patient, hungry, and alive, with secrets that will drag the unwary into the depths. Haunted island, drowned bells, cursed Mediterranean waters. Listen closely, or you may be the next to vanish.
You cannot escape. The island remembers.
The retired couple, Alejandro and Isabel Rivera, had spent decades dreaming of freedom on the open sea. Their sailboat, freshly polished and stopped, cut through the turquoise waters of the Mediterranean like a silver blade. On the horizon, Gemiler Island appeared, an abandoned, mysterious isle shrouded in ancient tales of drowned bells and lost sailors. The island seemed peaceful, almost inviting, but the air carried an unsettling chilling chill, subtle and imperceptible at first. Alejandro studied the crumbling ruins visible through the haze, while Isabel traced the outline of a sunken church bell tower half submerged by the waves. There was beauty here, yes, but whispers of old legends danced in the wind, teasing their curiosity and hinting at the peril that awaited them.
They've come. We remember.
Anchoring cautiously near the island's rocky cove, Alejandro ran the sail checks. The ropes were taut, the rudder secure, but then a small metallic groan came from the engine. Isabel's heart fluttered. Something didn't feel right. The island seemed alive, watching them, every stone and broken column holding centuries of secrets. The sun dipped further, casting eerie shadows over half-submerged ruins. Alejandro reassured her, explaining it was probably just a minor mechanical hiccup, but the sailboat shivered under the sudden gust of wind, like it too feared the night ahead. The calm waters were treacherous, hiding unseen currents that whispered of danger.
Stay. Stay.
Minutes later, Alejandro discovered the rudder jammed. No matter how hard he turned the wheel, it refused to respond. The sailboat swayed dangerously close to jagged rocks. Isabel gripped the railing, the taste of salt heavy in the air, eyes scanning the darkening shoreline. It was then that the faint tolling of submerged bells reached their ears, a chilling, impossible melody that seemed to come from the depths themselves. The sun dipped below the horizon, and suddenly, Gemiler Island no longer felt like a quiet ruin. It was alive, breathing, waiting.
You cannot leave.
The fog rolled in thicker and faster than they could have imagined, swallowing the sailboat's edges in a damp, ghostly veil. Alejandro squinted, trying to see the rocky shore, but the haze twisted shapes into grotesque figures. Broken stone columns jutted out of the water like jagged teeth, and the partially submerged bell tower appeared closer, almost impossibly so, as if the island itself had shifted overnight. Isabella's fingers trembled on the railing. The air was electric, heavy with a promise of peril. Every soft splash against the hull seemed amplified, echoing as if the sea itself were whispering secrets. Somewhere deep below, the drowned bells tolled again, louder this time, each note a warning Alejandro and Isabel could not ignore.
Turn back. Turn back now.
The sailboat rocked unnaturally, though no wind had yet picked up. Alejandro leaned over the railing and caught a glimpse of movement below. Dark, fluid shapes swirling around the keel, twisting and stretching like smoke. Isabel gasped. Her mind screamed at her to look away, but something compelled her to stare. The water wasn't just water anymore. It was alive. Something beneath the surface moved with intent, circling, whispering, drawing them closer to the island's abandoned piers. The drowned bells rang again, each tone vibrating through the hull, a spectral rhythm matching the pulse in Alejandro's chest. The island was awakening, and the couple's dream of a peaceful evening on Gemiler Island was twisting into a nightmare.
Join us forever.
Through the thick gray fog, a silhouette appeared. A fisherman, or something that resembled one, prowled the water in a rickety wooden boat, oars slicing silently through the waves. His face was obscured by a wide-brimmed hat and salt-crested hair, one eye glinting like a polished stone. He called out in a rasping voice, carrying over the water, "You shouldn't be here. Gemiler Island does not forgive the curious." Alejandro instinctively gripped the wheel tighter. Isabel recoiled. The figure's boat rocked unnaturally, as if it were tethered to the island itself. He floated alongside their sailboat, leaning close enough that the couple could smell the brine and something older, darker. "The drowned bells, they hunger," he warned, extending a gnarled hand as if offering help. Alejandro shook his head, fear overtaking courtesy. Isabel echoed silently, refusing any assistance. The fisherman's single eye narrowed. Then he tipped his hat once and drifted away, leaving only the distant tolling of bells and a sense of impending doom.
Last warning. Leave or stay forever.
After the fishermen drifted silently back into the gray mist, Alejandro and Isabel remained on the sailboat, hearts hammering. Silence pressed around them, thick and suffocating, broken only by the faint toll of submerged bells echoing from the island. They had refused help, pride, fear, hesitation, and immediately felt the weight of that choice. The sea seemed different now, restless, as if whispering their mistake. Shadows shifted unnaturally beneath the sailboat, the water curling into strange, twisting forms that vanished the instant they tried to focus on them. Alejandro gripped the wheel tighter, palms slick with sweat, glancing at Isabel. "We should have gone with him," he muttered, voice barely above the waves. Isabel's eyes darted across the fog-shrouded ruins. Maybe he knew what's coming," she whispered, a chill running down her spine. The sailboat groaned under the subtle current, nudging them imperceptibly toward the jagged rocks. The island was no longer just a quiet relic. It was alive, watching, judging, and reminding them that some warnings are never meant to be ignored.
You should have listened. It waits for you.
As darkness settled, the water around the sailboat began to stir unnaturally. Shapes moved beneath the surface, dark and fluid, twisting with every ripple. Alejandro's eyes widened as he tried to focus, but the shadows slipped away like smoke. Isabel clutched the railing, her breath shallow, feeling the pull of something unseen beneath them. It was as if the island's history, the drowned bells, the lost souls, the abandoned ruins, had seeped into the sea itself. The currents wrapped around the sailboat, gentle at first, then tightening, nudging them toward the island's hidden piers, whispering promises of secrets and horrors unseen. Every instinct told them to flee, yet the rudder remained stubborn, unresponsive, leaving them utterly at the mercy of the water's strange will.
Come closer. The sea remembers.
The fog thickened into a living wall, enclosing Alejandro and Isabel. Shadows danced across the water, hinting at shapes just beyond comprehension. Every splash sounded deliberate, every ripple a warning. The island itself seemed to breathe, moving subtly in the mist, as if watching their panic with patient curiosity. The submerged bells tolled, echoing with an intensity that vibrated through the deck. Alejandro felt a cold pressure on his chest. Isabel's hands trembled violently. The sailboat shivered in the unnatural current, reminding them that pride and fear had brought them here, to a place that did not forgive hesitation.
All who linger here are lost.
The currents grew stronger, swirling around the sailboat with uncanny intelligence. Alejandro struggled with the rudder, the waves tugging insistently, steering them closer to submerged rocks and half-sunken piers. Isabel's eyes caught glimmers of something moving just beneath the water, ghostly outlines, elongated shapes, constantly shifting, merging with the moonlight and fog. It wasn't fully visible, but the sea itself seemed alive, aware, resentful. Every bell toll echoed through the water, animating the currents as though the island's long-dead spirits had risen to claim trespassers. Fear gnawed at Alejandro and Isabel, the realization hitting them. Rejecting the fisherman's warning had bound them to the island's ancient will.
We remember. We take.
The night fully claimed Gemiler Island, and the sailboat was encircled by the restless waters. Shapes beneath the surface twisted and glimmered, partially illuminated by the moon, partially hidden in the thick fog. Each ripple felt deliberate, a silent predator nudging them toward the island's crumbling piers. The drowned bells rang incessantly, their echo vibrating through the boat and Alejandro's very bones. Isabel shivered, whispering, "It's as if the sea is alive." Alejandro could only nod, frozen, realizing that the fisherman's warning was no idle threat. The island, the water, the tolling bells, it had claimed them in mind and body, and in the distance, a faint shadow on the water hinted that the final reckoning had yet to arrive.
Forever. Forever. Forever.
Before Alejandro and Isabel could process the full horror of the island's curse, the restless water surged violently, rising like a living wall around the sailboat. Shadows beneath the waves twisted, forming grotesque shapes, tentacle-like currents wrapping around the hull, yanking it toward the jagged rocks. Alejandro fought desperately at the wheel, but the rudder snapped under pressure, splintering in his hands. Isabel screamed as icy water flooded the deck, pulling at her legs with unnatural strength. The drowned bells tolled a deafening final note, vibrating through their very bones. Ghostly currents coiled around them, dragging them screaming into the depths. Alejandro's hands grasped Isabel's, but it was futile. Both were pulled beneath the churning surface, their cries swallowed by the black water. The moon reflected on the turbulent waves, showing fleeting glimpses of terrified faces, some their own, some ancient, twisted by the sea's memory. In moments they vanished, leaving only the sailboat bobbing eerily in the fog, lifeless and silent.
All who linger here, join us forever.
Just when Alejandro and Isabel thought they had survived the night's torment, a shadow detached itself from the fog. The fisherman returned, silent and deliberate, his crooked figure cutting a dark silhouette against the faint moonlight. In his gnarled hands, he held a weathered plank of wood, etched with the name of their sailboat, La Maravilla. Without a word, he reached for it, the water around him glowing faintly, tendrils of mist wrapping unnaturally around his boat. Alejandro's shout caught in his throat. Isabel could only clutch the rail in horror as the fisherman's single eye glimmered with something ancient, knowing, and merciless. With a swift motion, he lifted the plank and placed it inside his boat. The currents shifted instantly, as if obeying him, and the sailboat, once trapped and helpless, was now pushed away from the island, disappearing into the fog. The drowned bells tolled one final, bone-chilling note, echoing across the water like a warning to all who dared approach Gemiler Island. Alejandro and Isabel's cries faded into the night, swallowed by mist and the sea's ancient memory. The fishermen drifted silently, sailboat's name in hand, leaving only darkness and the echo of the bells behind.
The sea keeps what is hers forever.
Gemiler Island receded into mist, its dark secrets sinking beneath the surface, but the stories of the drowned bells and restless currents lingered in the minds of all who heard them. Across the coast, the next adventure awaited, where the mountains of the Lycian Way stretched under a waning moon, and new whispers of the lost hiker began to stir. The sea had claimed its due, yet the land held its own terrors, waiting to pull the next unsuspecting travelers into shadows older than memory itself.
The land remembers. The lost are not gone.
On the sun-drenched trails of the Lycian Way, hikers believe the forest is safe, but hidden in its mist, the married djinn clan lurks. Ancient, aristocratic djinn, untouched by gods or devils, watching silently, waiting for the careless. Disappearing hikers vanish without a trace, leaving behind only echoes of screams and footsteps swallowed by the cursed path. The haunted forest whispers secrets no human should hear, and every shadow may conceal a supernatural terror beyond imagination. Animals take impossible forms, the night air carries unnatural chills, and the married control every restless spirit that roams the mountains. One wrong step, and the Lycian Way becomes a nightmare of ancient djinn, cursed trails, and vanishing hikers. Those who dare tread these paths face a darkness that remembers, a forest that punishes, and a terror that never forgets.
Your footsteps are watched. Your life is ours.
Ethan Walker had always chased the world's hidden beauty. At 28, a passionate hiker and nature photographer, he traveled alone, seeking untouched trails and ancient ruins. Today, the Lycian Way stretched before him like a living museum. Sunlit cliffs, whispering pines, and the calm, endless turquoise sea below. He paused often to photograph crumbling walls and the remnants of a civilization long past, unaware that every step along this ancient path brought him closer to a darkness the locals dared not speak of. For now, it was peaceful, warm sunlight on his face, the sound of birds, and the faint crash of waves against the cliffs. But even in the calmest daylight, shadows were waiting.
You are being watched, even now.
As Ethan followed the winding trail, the Lycian Way revealed its hidden corners, moss-covered stones, crumbling staircases carved into cliffs, and walls etched with symbols that had endured millennia. Each step seemed ordinary, yet the ancient air carried a weight of history and an unease he couldn't name. Sunlight dappled through the pine canopy, casting moving shadows that whispered of stories forgotten. Birds took flight at his approach, their sudden wings startling him, reminding him that even in this serene wilderness, he was not entirely alone.
Walk carefully. The old ones see you.
He paused to rest, setting his camera down to capture the glint of sunlight on the waves far below. The scent of salt and pine filled the air, soothing his senses. Yet, even in this quiet moment, a faint chill ran down his spine. A distant rustle, like something brushing against the forest floor, caught his attention. He scanned the slopes and the scattered ruins. Nothing moved, and yet the feeling of being observed persisted. Ethan shook his head, trying to brush off the creeping sense of dread, attributing it to over-imagination. But deep down, he knew something watched, hidden in the folds of the ancient cliffs and pine shadows.
They are near, closer than you think.
Continuing onward, Ethan noticed how the shadows grew longer and darker, creeping across the path like living tendrils. Every twisted stone and every gap between the ruins seemed to hide a presence. He stumbled briefly on an uneven patch of earth and glanced up, convinced he had glimpsed a figure among the trees. Nothing was there. Yet a whisper of wind seemed to carry voices, murmuring syllables he could not understand. The forest, so cheerful hours ago, had transformed subtly, its serenity now tinged with foreboding. Ethan pressed on, curiosity stronger than fear, unaware that he was edging closer to the heart of the Marid Djinn clan's domain.
Turn back, or pay the price.
As evening approached, Ethan found a small clearing to set up his camp for the night. The forest grew dense, the fading sunlight filtering through the tall pines in narrow beams. The ruins around him seemed to watch silently, stone faces carved by hands long gone, staring blankly as the shadows lengthened. The air grew colder, a dampness settling in that was not from the sea. For the first time, Ethan felt true isolation, not just the absence of people, but the pressing weight of the unseen. Every snapping twig, every rustle in the underbrush made his heart jump. He lit a small fire, hoping to keep the night at bay, unaware that the Marid Djinn clan, the most dangerous of all djinn, lingered nearby, their patience eternal, their gaze fixed on him from the dark corners of the forest.
We are patient. Your night is ours.
From the darkness, a lone goat stepped into the clearing. At first, it seemed harmless, almost comical, its white fur glowing in the firelight. But Ethan froze as the goat's eyes locked onto him, cold, calculating, impossibly intelligent. The hairs on his arms stood on end. Slowly, other creatures began to emerge, scuttling acrobatic shadows, black snakes coiling through the underbrush, and enormous scorpions creeping closer, their movements eerily coordinated. Ethan's breath hitched as he realized all these animals, every snake, scorpion, and even birds, moved in perfect obedience to the goat. The Marid Djinn had chosen its form, and all creatures of the forest now answered to it. This was no ordinary night, no natural threat. Every instinct screamed to run, but the forest itself seemed to shift, twisting paths and closing exits. The ancient Lycian ruins whispered with unseen laughter, as if the stones themselves approved of what was about to happen.
Follow the goat. Your life is already ours.
Ethan rubbed his eyes, convinced he was seeing things. Fatigue, the night, perhaps hunger. Surely it was a hallucination. But the movement was too precise, too deliberate. The goat's eyes gleamed with cunning, and its head tilted as if it understood every thought Ethan had. Snakes coiled into towering forms. Scorpions expanded into grotesque sizes. Birds swooped in unnaturally coordinated patterns, and shadows stretched into monstrous silhouettes that whispered in a language older than time. Ethan stumbled back, tripping over roots, heart hammering. The forest itself seemed alive, reshaping, bending, mocking him. The line between imagination and reality blurred. The married djinn, using its mastery over forms, had turned every living thing around him into instruments of terror. Ethan's scream caught in his throat as he realized there was no escape, only the cruel play of ancient, unseen forces that delighted in fear.
Your mind is ours. Your fear feeds us.
Ethan stumbled backward as the creatures around him convulsed and shifted. The goat's devil shape melted away, revealing a towering figure of fire and shadow, crowned with a jagged, infernal crown that radiated command and malice. Snakes hissed and stretched into blazing serpentine djinn. Scorpions transformed into grotesque armored horrors. Birds became skeletal harbingers, all forged from fear, blood, and fire. The air itself burned with heat and the stench of scorched earth. Whispers of ancient language cut through the night, promising pain, despair, and death. Ethan's mind reeled. He could see the full wrath of the Marid Djinn clan, aristocrats of terror, masters of every mortal nightmare, come alive in the Lycian Way forest.
We are eternity. We are fire. Your soul is ours.
The night air pressed in, heavy and suffocating. Ethan's legs refused to move, rooted by fear. The djinn advanced, each step punctuated by a hiss of molten scales and the snap of infernal claws. Their eyes burned like coals, radiating intelligence, cruelty, and an unyielding hunger. Ethan's chest tightened. Every breath was agony. The tailed, horned, flaming leaders whispered promises of torment as the second djinn mirrored every movement with lethal precision. Each second stretched into eternity. Ethan realized the legends had lied only in their generosity. There was no escape, no dawn, only the infinite nightmare of the married djinn's wrath.
Scream, beg, none will answer.
The djinn closed in, their forms blurring with fire and shadow, searing the edges of reality itself. Ethan fell to the ground, the hot air burning his skin, yet leaving no physical mark, only the deep, gnawing terror that seemed to sink into his bones. Whispers turned into laughter, molten voices echoing from the djinn's crowns and blazing eyes. Every limb, every nerve, every thought felt assaulted by their power. They bent the forest, the night, the very perception of time around him. For Ethan, seconds became hours, and hours became endless, unrelenting torment. The Marid djinn delighted in the cruelty of mortal fear, and Ethan's mind became their playground of suffering.
Pain is eternal. Fear is life.
He couldn't move. The djinn swirled around him, reality bending, gravity failing, air burning. Each step of the leader was a wave of pure terror. Every glance from the molten eyes seared his soul. The second djinn touched him, sometimes only a finger, sometimes entire limbs, and with each touch his body convulsed with unnatural pain, his mind fracturing under waves of fear, despair, and hallucinations so real he screamed without sound. Fire and blood seemed to flow through the night, casting shadows that danced like demons of old. The Marid djinn did not kill as humans do. They annihilated, consumed, and reshaped existence itself. Ethan's consciousness began to unravel, piece by piece, until nothing remained but a whispering void, the eternal playground of the Marid djinn.
Yield. Eternity is ours forever.
When first light broke over the Lycian Way, the clearing seemed untouched by the inferno of the night. Birds sang, the wind whispered gently, but subtle hints of horror remained. Scorch marks etched impossibly into stone, footprints that led nowhere, and the lingering heat of a fire that had no origin. Ethan Walker had vanished completely, leaving nothing but the echoing terror of the Marid djinn clan, whose crowns and flames would forever haunt the night of Lycian Way for any soul foolish enough to tread its cursed path.
We watch always.
As morning broke, the clearing seemed peaceful, almost serene, but the calm was a lie. Ethan Walker was no longer a wanderer of the Lycian Way. He had become an eternal plaything of the Marid djinn clan. In the shadowy veil between night and dawn, his screams echoed silently through realms of fire and blood, trapped forever in the djinn's unending nightmare. The goat leader's crown gleamed in the spectral light, and the subordinate djinn lingered, their forms molten, alive, eternal. The forest watched, patient and merciless, as Ethan's mind became a permanent echo of terror. Somewhere beyond the cliffs, beyond the winding paths, another story awaited, of a whispering lagoon hidden in Oludeniz, where secrets older than memory stirred beneath still waters. The Lycian Way had claimed its victim, and the darkness followed silently, ready to strike again.
Forever yours. Eternity is ours.
The waters of Oludeniz Lagoon are not as serene as they seem. Whispering voices rise from the dark depths, calling out to anyone who dares approach. Travelers vanish without a trace, their screams swallowed by the eerie stillness. Legends speak of an ancient, supernatural sea creature lurking beneath the waves, its eyes glowing like molten amber, its form shifting between liquid shadow and flesh. Scientists, explorers, and adventurers have all faced the lagoon's wrath, encountering the unthinkable. Drowned bodies, vanishing boats, and chilling whispers that promise death. Beware the Oludeniz Lagoon, where every ripple may conceal a horror beyond imagination, a dark, cursed and haunted place where curiosity meets a terrifying fate. Don't go near unless you dare to witness the unimaginable, the supernatural, and the horrifying truths hidden in the heart of the lagoon.
They are waiting beneath the water.
Dr. Ingrid Thorson's boots crunched against the pebbled shore as she stepped from the research vessel onto the damp sand, her eyes scanning the lagoon with a mix of professional focus and unease. The water gleamed like molten glass under the fading sun, but the reflection was fractured, flickering with strange shadows that didn't belong. 8 graduate students bustled around her, unloading tents, scientific instruments, and delicate containers filled with rare Mediterranean microorganisms. Sophie Hansen, bright-eyed and fearless, carefully carried a microscope as if cradling a living creature, while Lars Eick, meticulous and wary, double-checked every container, scanning the water nervously. The lagoon was almost unnaturally quiet. No gulls soared overhead, no crickets sang in the reeds. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper teased their ears, curling around them like smoke. Ingrid's gaze lingered on the water, noting subtle ripples that seemed to move against the wind, as if the lagoon itself were breathing, alive and aware. Each step they took felt watched. The soft lapping of the waves sounded suddenly sinister, as if hiding something deep and unknowable beneath the surface.
Welcome. You shouldn't be here.
As the sun dipped further, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges, the lagoon revealed its first secrets. Tiny ripples crawled unnaturally across the surface, moving with a purpose, converging in swirling patterns that made the students freeze mid-step. Sophie crouched at the water's edge, her eyes wide as she adjusted her microscope, tracing the faint bioluminescent shimmer of microorganisms she had never seen before. Lars leaned close, scanning the dark depths, his pulse quickening as shadows darted beneath the water, vanishing before they could focus. Ingrid felt the hairs on the back of her neck prickle. Something in the water watched them, patient, intelligent, waiting for a moment of vulnerability. A chill ran down her spine as she noticed the reflection of movement that didn't match the waves, forms twisting and coiling beneath the surface, shapes that were neither fish nor shadow. The lagoon was alive in ways that defied logic, a silent predator cloaked in beauty.
Look closer, but do not touch.
The students worked quickly, pitching tents and arranging instruments along the pebbled shore. The smell of damp earth and brine filled the air, mingling with the acrid scent of smoke from the small campfire. Ingrid's eyes swept over the group, noting their uneasy laughter, the nervous glances at the water, the way shadows seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. Sophie adjusted her samples, her fingers trembling ever so slightly as the water behind her shimmered with faint phosphorescent light. Lars double-checked the incubators, sensing shapes moving beneath the surface, always just out of sight. The lagoon's calm surface belied its darkness. It seemed to pulse subtly, the waves curling around invisible forms. The whispers grew stronger, rising and falling like wind through reeds, calling the students by name. Ingrid's heart pounded as she felt the pull of something ancient and inhuman beneath the surface, a presence that was watching, waiting, and hungry. She knew instinctively that the lagoon had already marked them, and that night would reveal horrors no microscope or textbook could explain.
They are here, watching, waiting.
Night had fully fallen, and the lagoon's surface shimmered like liquid glass, but now it twisted unnaturally. The currents moved against each other, forming strange vortices that sucked at the water around the students' tents. Sophie noticed her sampling bottles shaking violently, though no wind had touched them. Lars's flashlight caught a shadow beneath the water, elongated and fluid, writhing in ways impossible for any known marine life. Ingrid's heart raced. Her scientific mind screamed for a rational explanation, but deep in her chest, a primal fear told her there was none. Every ripple, every flicker of phosphorescence hinted at a conscious, malevolent intelligence lurking just beneath the surface.
Do you feel it? It's coming closer.
A scream shattered the night. One of the students, Henrik, had leaned too close to the water's edge. In a heartbeat, his body was pulled into the inky depths as if the lagoon itself had opened its mouth. The others froze, paralyzed by horror. Only his shoes remained on the pebbled shore, soaked and eerily still. Sophie gasped, tears in her eyes, while Lars rushed forward, only to be shoved back by an invisible force. Ingrid's voice cracked as she tried to organize the group, but even her commanding tone couldn't mask the terror clawing at her chest. The lagoon was alive, and it had claimed its first victim.
One is never enough. You will follow.
Panic erupted as the remaining students scattered along the shore. They called out Henrik's name, but their voices were swallowed by the eerie stillness of the lagoon. Sophie scanned the water through binoculars, catching glimpses of dark forms moving beneath the surface. Lars tried to gather the group, but every step toward the water made his stomach churn as the currents shifted unnaturally beneath him. Ingrid's mind raced, torn between logic and instinct. She could feel the lagoon pulsing like a heartbeat, aware of their fear, feeding on it. Shadows emerged, moving independently of the water, writhing like living smoke.
The next will join the first soon.
From the depths, it came. A towering form, dark and fluid, eyes burning like molten amber. Its body shifted between liquid shadow and tangible mass, rising from the water like a nightmare made flesh. Ingrid's breath caught. She had seen nothing like it in any marine biology textbook. The creature's presence warped the very air, and the students stumbled backward, their instruments forgotten. Waves slammed against the shore, carrying with them a stench of decay and salt. The lagoon was no longer water. It was an extension of the entity, a living weapon that hungered for them.
You cannot hide. I see you. I hunger.
The creature struck. Henrik's screams echoed from the water, though he was already gone. Sophie's arm was yanked violently beneath the rippling surface. Lars tried to pull her free, but a force like iron gripped him, dragging him toward the depths. Ingrid swung a lantern, hoping to scare the entity, but the light was swallowed instantly, leaving them in darkness. Every wave was a weapon, every ripple a strike. The lagoon had become a battlefield, and the students were helpless against the unrelenting horror that emerged from its heart.
All shall drown. All shall serve.
Chaos consumed the shore. Students were pulled in every direction. Some vanished silently, leaving only ripples and muffled cries. Sophie ran blindly, tripping over stones, only to see Lars vanish before her eyes, his body enveloped by dark, writhing water. Ingrid yelled, but her voice was swallowed by the chorus of screams and the malevolent whispers emanating from the lagoon. Fear clawed at her mind. Each moment felt like eternity as the water claimed one victim after another, dragging them into the abyss.
They belong to me. All of you.
The lagoon roared as though alive, the water twisting into monstrous forms, shadowy tentacles reaching toward every corner of the shore. Ingrid struggled to stay upright, feeling the pull of unseen hands beneath the surface. Sophie's cries were cut short as she was dragged toward a vortex that glowed with an otherworldly light. The water itself seemed to resist any escape, forming walls and barriers that twisted logic. Every heartbeat was a countdown, every gasp of air a reminder that the lagoon demanded their lives. Ingrid's mind screamed for a plan, but the lagoon had no rules, only hunger and wrath.
Surrender. Your souls are mine.
The students' terror materialized before their eyes. Each wave carried a shadow, each splash birthed a new horror. Ingrid watched helplessly as the water formed limbs, heads, and twisting faces, the creature reshaping the very essence of the lagoon. Sophie tried to fight back, but the liquid darkness wrapped around her, feeding on her fear, constricting her lungs, whispering promises of eternal torment. Lars was consumed silently, dragged beneath the surface by phantom arms that smelled of brine and decay. The lagoon no longer resembled water. It was a living prison, a predator, a tomb. Ingrid's own body trembled as the shadows licked at her legs, the whispers chanting in unison, a hypnotic, dreadful lullaby of death.
All fear will fuel me. All pain will serve me.
Ingrid felt herself lifted from the shore by invisible hands, her feet leaving the pebbled sand as the lagoon claimed its final victims. Around her, shadows writhed and twisted, faces of her colleagues appearing in the liquid blackness before disappearing again. The creature's molten eyes fixed on her, unblinking, intelligent, merciless. Her screams were swallowed instantly, her body dragged under the black surface. The lagoon seemed to close behind her, swallowing everything, boats, tents, instruments, leaving only silence. In that final moment, Ingrid realized that curiosity, no matter how scientific, could never triumph over ancient, unyielding horror.
You are mine forever.
The lagoon did not forgive, and it did not forget. Ingrid Thorson and her students were gone, swallowed by the black, writhing depths that had claimed them one by one. Their screams, their struggles, their lives, erased yet etched into the water itself. The surface shimmered with unnatural light, faint traces of glowing amber eyes scanning the moonlit horizon, watching for the next foolish intruder. The instruments floated adrift, their contents tainted, forever holding the echo of fear, of terror, of lives extinguished too soon. The air smelled of brine and iron, a metallic tang that clung to the lungs, leaving every breath a reminder of mortality. The lagoon whispered ceaselessly, voices rising and falling, weaving stories of death and torment for those who dared listen. Shapes moved beneath the water, larger than memory, shifting between shadow and flesh, always waiting, always patient, the darkness itself taking form. Even the fire from the abandoned camp tents flickered and died, the smoke curling unnaturally into shapes resembling faces, twisted in agony and pleading silently for release that would never come. In the chilling quiet that followed, the lagoon seemed to pulse with life, as if nourished by the fear, the despair, and the terror it had cultivated. Ingrid's final thoughts, fleeting and fragmented, were filled with regret and helplessness. The creature, the water, the abyss, it had claimed them all, leaving no trace beyond the rippling black mirror of the lagoon. Legends would speak of it, warnings would be whispered by sailors and villagers, but none could truly convey the sheer, inescapable horror of what awaited beneath the Oludeniz lagoon's serene, deceptive surface. Here, death was patient. Here, terror was eternal. Here, curiosity did not survive.
We wait forever, and your fear feeds us.
If you thought these haunted legends of Turkey were terrifying, the darkness doesn't end here. There are countless cursed places, abandoned ruins, and supernatural horrors waiting to be uncovered. Hit that subscribe button now, join our journey into the unknown, and never miss a chilling tale that will haunt your dreams. Dare to enter the world of true horror, where fear lurks in every shadow and every story could be your last.
Subscribe, or the darkness will find you first.